Holy shit.
Fucking
Hey,
10.
welcome. Punk Rock Safety Podcast, episode 10.
Number 10.
Unbelievable.
DS.
Pure
like,
by pure accident.
It's like
Are
one
we on?
episode for every year it took Ron to get his PhD.
That's accurate, actually.
It's now that we can't say almost Dr. Ron, we at least have to make fun of the length of time that it took. What's
Yeah.
it like to be a surgeon?
It's, it can be stressful sometimes, but someone those appendixes aren't going to remove themselves,
And
man.
when you're doing God's work, you just need to make sacrifices, right?
That's
Oh,
right.
fuck yeah, man. And if anybody does God's work, it's fucking me.
It's I've heard, man, if I had a nickel for every time I'd heard that. By the way, if you're listening to the podcast, but you haven't ever gone on YouTube, today should be the day because Ron he's just tying the place together. He's got a really cool jacket, the one that Brian Hughes wishes he had.
Yeah.
Man, it looks good.
You got to
It
show
looks
us that
sexy.
back, Ron. Show us the back of that
Show
jacket.
It's sexy as hell.
Check
There
it
it
out.
is. Man,
Yeah.
that's good looking.
And if you're only listening, I literally just showed my ass.
Yeah, just and
Well, it might
yelled
have
sexy as hell about it. Yeah.
And both Dave and Ben are like, man, that looks good.
It does look good.
Cool.
That's right.
Normally, we talk about sort of what we were listening to recently, and then there's a background that goes with it. But Ron has a different background.
An artist's rendering of my PhD
A courtroom
defense.
sketch, if you will.
Oh, yeah. Of my
I mean, I
PhD.
was there. It looked just like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I mean,
Ron,
you're like, this is you right here, right?
That's you.
Ron defended his.
Oh,
it was
Cthulhu.
a week
That's
ago.
not how
A
you
week
say
ago,
it.
Ron, you defended your
Yeah.
thesis, and
Sorry.
Ben was there in person. And I noticed he was, because I was zooming in, I noticed he was sitting directly across from you, just like staring you down for the whole.
Yeah, it was really
And then-
uncomfortable.
It
then
was
partway
He
through,
was
he
mumbling
just
at
got up,
times.
got up and walked out. Partway through, he just got up and walked out.
just pieced out. Yeah. I'd had enough.
He
Walked
couldn't
out.
handle.
I was
Couldn't
like,
hang.
this. I don't need any more of this shit to say no. I was coughing, and it was disruptive, and I thought the respectful thing to do would be leave. So then I waited like 10 minutes of being disruptive and then left. It was really hard. I was right across from Ron, and I was trying not to make eye contact because I thought this was a stupid place to sit. But it started before it took me by surprise. All of a sudden we were doing it.
Well,
Yeah.
Ron was doing it. I don't know what you were doing.
I don't know if Ron was there were a lot of other people talking that weren't Ron.
Yeah, this is a fact.
Ron was just really defending his right to speak at his own PhD defense.
So how was that? How was that for you, Ron?
That was amazing. Couldn't recommend it higher. 5 stars. No, it was fine.
We did a
you know,
Borat
I mean,
quote while we
I
were
did.
in there.
I did a Borat quote in my PhD defense. I did not plan on that. That was not something that, like, when I was preparing, that I was like, okay, and this is where I'm going to drop the Borat quote. And
It's a real organic process.
it was, yeah, no, I that's just who I am,
Well, I think as this podcast can attest to, planning is highly overrated.
Yeah, yes, exactly.
And we never did, now that you mention it, get around to planning this episode.
Well, we
Other
still
than,
never
I
actually
think-
spoke about Ron's background. So Ron's background is a result of Ben just messing with
sorry.
his with his AI.
Yeah,
Go for it.
How did you create it?
I typed, what was the prompt?
Something like a bald guy.
Bald guy, short beard with a sweater, I had to say defending a book, an old book with a sword, with zombies, and then I always say Cthulhu, but that's not how you pronounce that weird octopod looking guy. And that's what I mean, it was everything I hoped for. Showed up.
AI does its thing. I mean, I think that's got to be the absolute most
Brilliant.
best
How
use
did
of
the AI
artificial
know I was
intelligence.
wearing Mickey ears to the defense?
Oh, I added that. I did add that. Sorry. Yeah. I was very, very specific with the prompt. I actually just said, find a picture of Ron Gant and put him in. And it was not you. It was a guy with flowing locks, and
What?
it
That's
was a
not
little
me.
aspirational. Yeah. What I was really hoping was the Octo picture.
Oh God, that would have been epic.
Yeah.
Would have been great. So what have you been listening to, Ron? Anything good?
Well, so a lot of actual social distortion,
Yeah, buddy.
and then a hardcore band every time I die. Um,
Oh,
yeah, good shit, getting me pumped up, excited, singing loudly. Now that I'm a doctor, my tastes are refined.
do
So
do whatever. Yeah, do whatever you want now.
yeah, what are they gonna do?
Can't take it away from you. It's not like your birthday. You know. Jeez.
I'm sorry, they can take your birthday away?
Yeah, I've heard that. I
Is
don't
that
know who
called
they are, but I'd
is that
watch out.
called dying?
Well,
Every
I
time I
guess.
die, you said you were listening to.
Oh, see, wow, that was really nice.
Yeah.
That's good. You're amazing.
Dave's got a picture of a raft here, one of
Well,
his
there's
favorite things.
a few things going on. I thought in celebration of our big 10 anniversary, I thought I'd just a bit of a throwback to the early episodes. And the long
Ah,
conversation about the raft, but the raft was a bit of a happy accident. I was actually looking for a nice, decent stage dive, kind of a pretty aggressive
Yeah.
stage dive photo, and I'm kind of hoping
I
when we get to our topic of today, which if I assume it's the right topic, it'll make a little bit more sense. Otherwise, I'm not even
okay.
going to let it out in case we don't end up talking about what I think we're going to talk about.
I'm
I
so
I
hoping we're
yeah.
not going to talk about it.
I don't know what it is, but I'm gonna try my best. That guy, I don't know where that guy's jumping from in that picture is
Yeah.
the tough part. I mean, it looks like he just dropped from space.
Could well be. Could well
Yep.
be.
I've got propaganda behind me. There's a lot going on in the US of A. We're the day before 4th of July and we're, you know, as we do dismantling some things. So, nothing like a little Canadian punk just
Yeah.
to set the mood here. Yeah, I went down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I've made fun of ska on here a few times and I'll do it again. But I was listening to Goldfinger, which I think is it's a bit of ska punk in there.
Hmm.
I've said it on here and then I'm gonna claim I didn't. It's all right.
You will be.
Dave, should we let Ron pick what we're
No,
talking
what are we talking about?
Well, the episode was so this was meant to be a sort of a bit of a festival of Ron type episode, right? Like just
Yeah,
celebration of number 10, the PhD. And Ron's PhD was there's a lot of fancy words in Ron's PhD.
it is.
But
Can you just tell us, Ron, the title?
So I don't actually have an official title yet because they
Fucking
shut
hell.
down my
This
title.
fucking guy.
I
They
had
shut down the title?
they weren't a fan of it. They
Okay.
think
Well,
West
not a
Side
doctor,
bad,
apparently.
but what is my title now? I went from having a David Bowie Queen reference in the title. I think I
Well,
went to
hold on, give us the original title, the one we would have known.
well, shit, I don't remember it now. So it
Ron,
was
God damn it.
Under Pressure. Um, what was it like? Cross-boundary joint activity and the multi-party dilemma.
come on, Ron.
Yeah.
The original title was something to do with drift. Just cast
Oh,
your
fuck.
Well,
cast
yeah,
your cast your
a
Yeah,
mind back a
decade
bit
ago.
further.
A decade ago.
yeah, like forever
And
ago.
Eric brought that up actually in the defense, didn't he?
He did. That was great. He said, "We're talking about drift, right?" Uh, okay.
Cool,
Nobody.
bro.
But so in and amongst all those fancy words and joint party,
Yeah.
cognitive activity and something about boundaries, I think at the heart of that was at the heart of that's really contractor management, right? At the heart of that.
I mean,
That's
that's gonna
it.
be
100%.
the most common like application of it, right? So
This is literally Ron is describing a conversation by
yeah,
calling it cross-boundary joint cognitive activity.
yeah, it's like people working together. No, so cross-boundary joint activity is you got two agents working across some kind of meaningful boundary. The most meaningful boundaries that people are dealing with are going to be in a contracting relationship. So, yeah, contractors, that's probably it. It doesn't have to be, because I think
Could
the
be
feature
departmental, could it, or
exactly like you could think of like intra-organizational where yeah, you have like silos or functional pillars that approach the sort of some of the challenges you would have in dealing with a third party. But
is this
most,
like when Dave and I steal each other's clients?
yeah, it's totally like that actually. Yeah. But yeah, and I think that's a good point. Like it does, like we typically when we think of contractors, we're going to think of the normal, like, someone coming to do some sort of, like a general contract or something like that. But it could be a consultant, it could be part of your supply chain. There's all sorts of relationships that have these sorts of challenges. So I don't know. That's it in a nutshell.
So we are going to talk about contractor management today, right?
Yeah, sure. Why the fuck not? So tell us about your picture.
So, no,
He's
I
just
was-
he's so excited about
That
it.
question was so like, we're gonna do it, right? Like you're gonna let me? Can I talk about it?
Can I talk about this guy?
so I was trying to think of the
Is he a
best way.
contractor? He's a contractor, isn't he?
Think about no. I was thinking he's the client. He's the client, just going, coming ready or not. And I was actually looking for like I couldn't find. I was either going to look for a big naked guy stage diving or like just a really big guy in general, just to sort of like personify the.
I'm right here.
so, so
His name.
imagine Ben, right?
I can
And
hear
so
you.
it's a bit like the client, just like, and all of the contractors below saying, please, no, don't do it again. Don't do it again.
Yeah.
And just going, I'll do what I fucking want. If I want to jump on you, minions, I'll jump on you, minions.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
At least there's a raft.
well, that's the contractors because they've dealt with so much client shit so many times. They're now prepared with how to deal with it.
Yeah.
They've scoped appropriately.
They go, yeah, we can deal with this shit again. We know how to deal with it. Here they go again.
Well, I think like if I take myself out of my PhD mindset and just think of like my experience,
Boy, that's tough to do.
yeah, right. And I'm recovering. Don't worry, it's 4th of July weekend, so I'm going to drink enough alcohol to kill those brain cells.
How many times are you going to mention that you got this PhD, Ron?
A few more.
Okay, all right.
A lot
few
more.
more. Um, no,
We'll
like
give you one more episode to talk about this shit, and then you have to
I
shut
am
up.
not talking about it ever again. I'm forgetting it ever happened. But like a lot of times you hear organizations complain that like their biggest problem is their contractors. Their contractors don't follow the rules or they're, having the most accidents and stuff like that. Which is sometimes a bit rich because like they are the ones often with the higher authority in that relationship
Yeah.
than contractors have, and I'm not saying that it's an easy problem to solve, but I am saying that like a lot of times I find a lot of times people will like disempower themselves in how they frame a problem, and it's I don't think it's intentional, but like they'll just frame it in a way that like removes all of their ability to like have leverage over it. And I think contractors is an example of
I
that.
think in psychology, Ron, I think it's called learned helplessness.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's protectionism, right? It's a
Yeah.
good excuse for why it can't work,
Yeah.
despite not trying.
So I haven't written any papers per se on contractor management, but I have
That's shocking.
just putting it out there. I'm just putting it out there. But
Should we write one? Do you want to write one?
well,
I'll
maybe.
tag along. Can I be third author on this thing?
Maybe
Jeez.
we can just get a transcript of this episode and submit it to a few journals and see what comes back.
Amazing.
100%.
That'll be like that thing I sent you guys, a few of these folks that have done 200 papers published so
Yeah.
far this year.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
Epic.
That's good. That's a lot of students.
You were talking about a paper that you didn't write, one of the 6 or 7 there are.
Yeah, but I have worked on both sides of the boundary, to quote your PhD, Ron. So I worked contractor side in EPC construction for a long time, and then client side in oil and gas for a long time. So, I've been a dick on both sides of the boundary.
Well, like
the
what?
the
What?
glory hole of boundaries, where
That's
there's a
not
view from both sides.
that's not what I said, Ben. But yes,
I think I think I
it
think
does.
it's what Dave meant is
That's
that
what you call a non-porous boundary, where the
Absolutely.
perspective
okay.
of those different agents is different.
It's going to be in the title of the paper.
Yeah. The
You're
I
welcome.
non-porous glory hole.
I'm worried that might be the
Trademark.
title of the podcast.
There we
Um,
go.
why is this so hard? Why is it why I'm gonna rephrase. Why is this so difficult?
Happy, that was just a happy accident, wasn't it, Ron?
Yes, it was.
Uh,
Why is this so difficult in y'all's estimation? You all have dealt with this stuff.
think it feels maybe part of it is that it feels like enough to try to manage your own circus. People that feel sort of chronically understaffed or under-resourced, and they're trying to sort this out on their own, and then to try to get behind the wall these different contractors to see what's going on. Maybe you don't feel like you're in a position to say, look, this is the way we do it. Um, we need you to get on board and do it this way, because really it's the financial bit that's driving it. So for safety folks, I think you genuinely feel, maybe without evidence, that you don't have any say.
Uh, and I also think that I think a couple of things for me in this. The first is that I think there's a really big kind of work as imagined, work as done gap. So I think on the client side, you just
Mm.
sort of imagine what it is to like be a contractor. Like, I paid you to build a wall, just turn up and fucking build a wall, right? And I'm paying you to do that. So how hard can it be? So,
Build the wall, and we're going to make Dave pay for the wall.
there's no, yeah, well, yeah, make the podcast
Sorry.
great. Yeah, make the podcast great again. Um,
Oh
um,
God, on the eve of Independence Day.
that's
That's
like
fucking
that's like Ben going, I'm going to launch a merch store and I'm going to pay for everyone's merch.
hell yeah.
So,
Yep.
but I just think there's a lack of understanding of what it's like to be a contractor, right? In terms of like the pressures and the
Yeah.
challenges and work and working with all different organizations with all different expectations. So I think on that one hand, I think companies kind of like don't really take the time to appreciate what that world really looks like.
Yeah.
And then I think on the second piece is that companies have kind of like one management strategy, which they adopt to manage kind of like their own employees and their own internal work, and then they try to adopt that same management strategy to manage their contractor workforce. So, reach down and in and try to intervene at the level of the behavior and try to set rules and oversight arrangements. And that management strategy just doesn't work across. It's just not an effective management strategy for a contracting relationship. And so they're the two things that spring to mind. Like, clients don't understand their contractors, and then they try to manage their contractors like employees.
Yeah.
It's really tough to, I don't expect isn't the right word, but I think it's tough for folks to devote the time to do both of those things, which is to understand and then to adopt some other management strategy, because the whole impetus behind hiring a contractor is that you don't have time or expertise to do this thing you've asked someone else to do. So now sort of devoting time to understanding the process, I think for a lot of folks seems counterintuitive. Maybe, I mean, to your question, Ron, maybe that's why it's so difficult,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
part of why it's
And
so
then you
difficult.
kind of end up buying the dog and barking yourself, right?
Yeah. I like I like this. I like
Yeah.
these little
Hold on, I'm
Australian
going to
uh,
take some notes here.
old timey
Dave, Dave said fun things.
yeah, fun things with Dave. Um, but like, I mean, I think I agree with I agree with everything you guys are saying. It actually is very consistent with this stuff that I found in the research. Because like number one, like you guys talked about the additional work, the additional challenges, the effort that has to go into this. And I don't think people recognize that like all cooperative work has costs associated with it, right? Like it's, you bring someone in to do like work with you, like anybody who's been working on a task on their own and then adds another person to help support them knows that there has to be work in that you exert in order to bring that person up to speed. You're monitoring each other's activities, like that sort of coordination has, it has effort that you have to exert, right? And a lot of times that's unsupported, not recognized. They just think, like you said, hey, I paid you to do this, go fucking do it. But we don't take the time to actually, okay, how are we going to synchronize ourselves and like, build good communication, good coordination, collaboration sorts of mechanisms to make this happen. And then secondly, how do we build good observability? Right. So like, how can I make it so that it's easy for me to see what you're doing? You can see what I'm doing. And because like when we can observe how, really see what's going on and keep, monitor each other's progress, it makes it easier for us to help and support one another. Like if I don't know what's going on because I'm worried that you're going to step in and like shut my job down because you think we're doing a bad job, then I'm going to shut down your ability to see how well I'm doing. I'm going to thwart it. I'm going to hobble it. I'm going to hide shit. That's it just
Is
makes
that,
it so difficult.
Ron, you were back to this defense, which I was rapt, paying such close attention that I'm going to even,
You were outside coughing for most of it.
yeah, I know. The part that I was there for.
The Borat quote.
The
The
bit
Borat.
the bit that Dave was talking for, was that the part you were there for?
Yeah. There,
Yeah, if you were rap, that was Dave. That was Dave,
there
right?
was a moment
The other
when
Dave, the
Ron
smart Dave.
was able to speak, but you were talking about, I think, the difference between observability and transparency.
Hmm.
And I've probably got this wrong, but that's why there are doctors on this show. Um, to me, observability feels more purposeful.
Hmm.
It's got context, maybe it's intelligence that I can act upon. Transparency is just sort of you can see through the window, but there's no real context to it. Have I got that wrong, or is that when you talk about observability, is that
Yeah.
close?
So I think, I don't know. Question I wasn't really, again, another one to chalk up on. Braun didn't plan for that.
I thought you answered it beautifully in there.
But yeah, when I was first thinking about it, I think that's what I went to. And I think we could talk about transparency separately, but like to me, observability has to be a purposeful, intentional thing that you build in to the system, right? Like, because it doesn't happen on its own. I mean, go back to the conversation we had about leadership, a number of podcasts ago about open door policies and stuff like that. You have to be purposeful about this and create space and create processes or whatever, a climate, if you will, even for
Could you create
collaboration.
an audit? Because Dave knows
I was just
how
about to
much
mention.
I love, how much
I
I
mean,
love.
the best way to do this is a checklist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
But the reality is that a lot of folks out there deal with this. Like there are, of the two people listening, at least half of them have to deal with
But
audits with
by two, do you
contractors,
mean
right? It's
like
super common.
by two people listening right now? Do you mean Rod and I listening to you, or
yeah, yeah.
real people?
Nailed it. Yeah. The real people,
But I
actual
think
listeners.
what I understand Ron talking about when he talks about observability is observability of the work, right? The work and the dependencies and the progress and
Yeah, there
and
you go.
and
I
these
think
things.
the
I mean,
dependencies are important.
an audit is not about observing work. An audit's about what you look for is what you find, right? It's Ron's checklist, and
Yeah.
it's just
Can be.
yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. It's not going to help you better coordinate activity.
Yeah, yeah,
But if
totally.
what was it our first episode we talked about audits
I think so.
and how to make an audit suck less? Because a binary compliance audit is pretty shit. But if you do have a performance audit, I think an audit in its best format is is sort of like starter questions, right? Because Ron will ask different questions than I will, or so on. And so I think what you may end up happening, you may end up, yeah, is that it feels like sort of pet projects, right? If Ron looks at the auditor, he's going to be really tough, or at the contractor, he's going to be really tough on them. But if Dave goes and talks to him, he likes these guys, and so they'll go by. So I think in its best form, an audit, which a lot of people have to deal with at work, whether we like it or they like it, in its best form, it's a series of questions that can start the conversation about how work gets done versus just saying yes, no, yes, no.
Yeah.
So if you have to have an audit, maybe push the limit of how it works.
Yeah.
Well, to that end, I think a place that is like ripe for, people are like, okay, not to jump too far ahead, but like, what can I do? Is like, we audit our contractors to make sure they're adhering to the contract, which is the bad form, I would say. But if you
Yeah.
start from the place that this is always going to, like, contracting is always going to have additional effort that needs to be exerted to make this work. And like, we haven't even talked about the fact that contractors also are they're hired for their expertise, but they're not hired for their expertise in the context of your organization necessarily, which is
Yeah.
again something they have to orient themselves to and take time to understand your processes. So like there's all kinds of additional challenges that they're managing regularly that we just don't capture in our audits, we don't pay attention to. So like
Yeah.
that's probably a good place to start the audit conversation or the audit questions is where are these challenges? How are they adjusting to these challenges?
Yeah.
And I think that that questions, Ben, that you mentioned questions and your description there, Ron, is really really helpful. And I guess when we think about contemporary safety management and using whatever trademark term you want to use to describe that, we're really trying to understand how to make work successful, right? So when does a client go to a contractor and say, "What can we do to make your work for us more successful? What are the things that we're doing that's making it harder for you to do the work in the time, in the scope, in the budget, and actually asking contractors like and then for when I mentioned earlier about management strategy, the client having a management strategy that's more in service and support of their contractor, because ultimately, if the contractor is successful, the client's successful, right? So why wouldn't the client organization want to devote 100% of its time and efforts to trying to understand everything that it can possibly do to make the contractor successful, on the original scope, and not do anything without asking kind of permission of the contractor to do that? Like, would it be helpful if we came and asked you about the 3 recordable injuries that you had last week? And if the contractor turns around and goes, "No, you can just fucking stay in your desk this week," we rather than the contractor spending a week and a half preparing a presentation and designing a new behavioral based safety program and doing, like, if clients just led with questions and asked permission of the contractors before they did anything, I think they have far more successful outcome from their contractor workforce.
Well, I think
That's a
there's
soapbox. I
something.
jumped on the soapbox wrong because
No, no, no. But
if
I
you
do
get on your
think there's
soapbox too much
something.
today, you might get fired.
There's something even simpler though. Or maybe first. I don't know. But it's you came back to what can we do so that you're more successful, or what are we standing in the way of to that you can be successful? And then you said if the contractor is successful, then the client is successful. And I think maybe sometimes that's a friction point because success can be defined differently. And I think where I see issues really come up is it's that mismatch of how we define success.
Yeah. Okay.
Is the contractor's version of success the same as the client? And
I
I
mean,
think if
my
we're not
version,
just
I would hope that the joint, I guess there's a boundary there, but the joint version of success is quality, cost, schedule, right?
yeah,
Um,
or that it's defined well enough in the scope to be, I guess, not only to be meaningful, but to be clear. But I think, Dave, you've been in enough of these. I mean, you've seen enough of these relationships. Ron has late, I think lately seen this quite a bit too. But I think, what good looks like to a contractor when you say, you know what, no, you can fuck off, and you go, well, hold up. There's some other pressures that we have to face.
Yeah.
And I think for us, good really looks like this. Is there a way that we can make sure those things match.
Well, I
I
think
don't know. This is
I think you both are bringing up really good points, even though they can seem in opposition. I think they're both, they do exist together in the real world. Like on one hand, there are a shit ton of goals that are aligned, and the broad strokes definition of success is the same. But when you dig into the details, there are often nuanced, varying definitions. So like cost and schedule are easy ones that you can point to, like right off the bat, like all things being equal, the contractor wants the highest cost, the customer wants the lowest cost, right? So and yes, we can negotiate that out, but like that dynamic is always going to be present, and it's going to be non-trivial most of the time in how it affects.
hey Ron, maybe in the defense, and I'm hung up on that defense because it was so good. The part that I was there for
Yeah.
was really good. But I think you were talking about, maybe it was there, about working with a contractor to say, look, here are these six things that are on the table that are all things that are important. Which one of these is the one that's most important? Can I clear out of the way for you? And I think that's baselining that what success looks like. I don't think those things are in opposition at all. I think that's just additive to what Dave was saying, which is it's I think so often it starts to fall apart because we forget that we have to come back to that touchstone so often. It doesn't seem like we should have to.
Yeah.
But today, what are the top three things that you're dealing with? What can I get out of the way for you?
Yeah.
Tomorrow, those top three are different potentially. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And I think
I don't know.
no, it's a good point.
Nobody
And I
asked
think
me.
but I think also, you mentioned about, other pressures, and I'm probably being a little bit hard on clients because I think clients really have to shoulder a lot of effort to change the nature of this relationship. A bit like management have to shoulder the effort to change the nature of their relationship with employees, right? Because there is power. And, Pro said that power is an
Yeah.
issue in safety more important than culture, right? So we need to understand there's a power dynamic at play here. Hence my stage diving guide diving onto a bunch of minions who only have a small inflatable raft to protect themselves from and so I think inside the client organizations there are pressures. So okay, this contractor's had a few injuries, and that might go all the way up to the board in the client organization, and the board then says you need to do something. But again, if you're in the safety team or something inside the client organization, like don't be so fucking lazy. Like talk to your board and
There
say
it is.
it's not helpful for us to go to this
Yeah.
contractor and distract them over minor issues. They let them manage their own shit. No one died, and we'll stay focused on the important things. Thank you very much. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's a super important point, Dave. I don't want to overdo it and give you a big head here, but no, I think it it is. I mean, it can get so contentious about, well, you have to now prove to me, you've proved all these things before to the point that we've hired you and we trust you with the work. Now keep reproving this stuff over and over and over, and there's no end to it. I think that's so frustrating from a contractor's perspective. So, yeah, very cool.
And I think one of the things that contractors routinely do is they try to orient themselves to please their customer. And
yeah,
so that is going to draw, again, it's work, it's effortful, and that's going to draw resources and attention away from the shit you actually want them to be focused in on.
Yeah.
They're going to be trying to please you, and in the process of trying to please you, the unintended byproduct of that is they are going to be giving you a distorted view of what's really going on where the
yeah,
work's happening, because they're going to try to please you by showing you, hey, look, we're all in control, everything's fine, look over there, when things could not be in control, right? Because again, the stakes are too high. You've created this, this sense of like, holy shit, if we make a mistake, we have, hell to pay, and that it's just so caustic. It's so bad for the
yeah.
relationship.
And I think in that
Does
But
it
relationship,
amplify? Does it amplify at that boundary? Any weakness or friction or you know, mismanagement, does it amplify that at that boundary? I mean, both company, like the worst is going to come out when we're trying to work together across that
well, yeah,
that
because
that
I think
boundary.
that plays with the the lack of observability. Like analogy just popped in my head is that one of the things that people point to that's one of the challenges in like email, social media,
Mhm.
with human interaction is you lose a lot of the nuance because you don't have the context around the communication. And so you can intend for a sentence to come across one way, but without, verbal cues, behavioral cues, um, it could come across something completely different to the other person. Well, we just described a situation where there's a lack of observability across the boundary. So communications often don't have that context and they easily get misunderstood and often get misunderstood in a way that's like really bad for that party, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so like it's just and I think we all can experience this like when no matter what side of the boundary you're on where you've had someone communicate something like hey this would be a good idea and the other side will interpret that as oh the customer wants us to do this which all of a
Ah,
sudden
yeah.
something that was just
Yeah.
like a side comment maybe a recommendation becomes a directive for better or worse
And
and
yeah,
that's
Ron, what you found, there's actually some bit of research I found in the institutional literature on corruption of role and task. And when I did my kind of research, even though it was intra-organizational, it's kind of really interesting because when I was able to kind of research the conversation that actually happened in the boardroom and then how that task got basically distributed and acted on in the organization. And even with the best of intent, like a group of directors or a client sitting around going, we're a little bit concerned about this. We'd really like all of our sites to check and confirm that this is in place, to come back and ask us what they need or any problems that they're having. And like something that comes from real genuine intent, as it goes into the business as an action, it turns into a compliance task, right? The board needs us to confirm that this is in place. Tick. Like it loses that context and nuance and intent as it flows. And I think that is amplified across organizational boundaries, right? Because communication gets even further sanitized,
yeah
of any discernible intent.
yeah
So
yeah I think it's a really good analogy, and it's a good example of how these dynamics, I think, can play out inside the organization, where you have similar sorts of, lack of observability, lack of, context, sort of playing out.
and
But
then in the
yeah,
absence of trying to break that down, like when I do some training with safety professionals, one of the first things from a role point of view, I get them to go and speak to a few of their stakeholders about, how would they describe what their role is, and it's not a bad exercise to do. If you're a listener to safety, well, go ask a few people about what they think your role is, and see how you feel that compares to what you think your role is. And I won't forget one person came back and said he spoke to basically a project manager, and he was contractor side, right, of the supply chain. And he said, look, your role is if anything happens in relation to safety, to get the biggest fucking broom you can, find the biggest fucking rug, and sweep as much of that shit under the rug as you possibly can. Like that's
Nailed it.
that's your job.
This comes back to the second episode of what safety people
I just
do.
want to see like, like one of those in case of emergency, like glass things. And it's just got a big fucking rug and a
Broom.
broom.
There you
That
go.
is
There's
so
a
sure.
Ben's got a notepad on the side of his computer with with
Yeah.
all of the merch ideas. So
The
the
merch.
role
We're
of the
selling
safty person,
brooms.
yeah. In
We're
case of
selling
It'll
brooms.
just be like this in case of incident kind of like thing. In case of incident, here's a big rug and a big broom.
That's
I
so
I
good.
think we can get at least a large blanket printed up. Put that on the merch
Oh,
store. It's another thing to lose some money from.
No, what we need to do
I
is
think
we just need to get Ron a nice Zoom wallpaper done up like that. So the next time he gets invited to a client meeting about his incidents, he can just have it as a wallpaper, right?
just a rug with a
Just a
just a
rug with a
corner,
broom.
just a corner peeking up there.
God, I
And
love
then
That'll
sit
be
there and go,
good.
oh, you know about those two? Glad you don't know about the other five.
By the way, have you seen my jacket? It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, do you, so I was working with some folks the other day, not to bring us back on topic here, which is not really my
One
style,
of one
but
of my clients or one of your own?
Jesus, we're gonna keep we're gonna keep doing it. Um, I mean, a soon to be your client, probably. I'm sure. Um, But we were
Well,
working on both sides of it,
your
right? So
service.
sort of the client and the contractor. And in that case, the contractor was doing, they were doing some things around safety that I think were a few years ahead and maybe from the look of it, a lot more effective than what the client was doing. And that's an odd relationship too, because normally it's sort of directive. I'm not saying that's good, but ordinarily the relationship is one of power, right? And it's directive, and we're trying to tell people how they need to do it. And instead of that push, I think it's sort of a pull, and that goes back to Dave's point of saying, look, what are the questions I can ask instead of me dictating to you how our own employees do it? Because there's some really cool opportunities, I think, to learn from contractors who've had a
Oh,
chance
so
to mess around with these things.
my experience has been, and a huge generalization, which it's generalizations are maybe wrong but useful. We see contractors are far more progressed in their safety management than a lot of clients. I see that play out in construction, particularly. I see it play out in oil and gas. We see it play out
Yeah,
in mining. Because contractors have to innovate. They have to be nimble and agile. They have to be able to solve problems. They have to be, able to do things that work. They don't have, big capital budgets to invest in programs unless they're confident that there's a meaningful return around them. So, we see, if you look even across some of the contemporary safety conferences that we've all been at, you'll see a lot of contracting organizations sort of presenting the case studies and what they're doing. And in a lot of ways, they're actually being held back by their clients
yeah.
from continuing to make meaningful progress. Like it's
I mean, this
almost
is
like,
sort of
well,
TRIR, right?
well,
It
yeah,
it
like we
lives on in the world
we
because
really
they
want to
keep
be
being
doing this,
asked.
but we need to compromise on what we'd like to be doing, just so that what we're
Yeah,
doing is in some way legible to our clients, right? And not seen
right.
to be just too um, too deviant from traditional safety practice, right? But a lot of clients really need to look at their contractors and learn from them. And unfortunately, most of them think it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Well, and I think to that end, like I see a lot of, and this goes back to like, Drew, and I think you were involved in that work too on the original sort of decluttering projects where
I'd
you
be
have,
shocked if Dave wasn't. He's been
I
involved
was
in.
I, I was actually, and it's um,
Now that you mention it,
but like, yeah, where you guys found that like in these contracting relationships, there was often duplicative work because the client would require something on top of what the contractor was requiring, even
yeah,
though the contractor's stuff was as good or better. Um, and I think, a lot of the times in my experience, the reason that's done is to make it easier for the customer. It's like if you standardize, it's easier for us to know if it's there or not.
yeah.
So making their
yes,
work easier when the reality is they should actually, all you're doing is pushing the difficult work to the contractor who already is doing difficult work.
yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe if you did some
Or
of that
just
difficult,
time
Okay,
consuming
so
work. It's not
this
even difficult.
this
It's just bullshit
this paradigm is absolutely fucking stupid and unsafe. And so the idea that we see in clients
and
of
lazy. Don't forget lazy.
super fucking lazy,
lazy.
and
It
going
is
to a
lazy.
contractor
Yeah.
and saying, we want you to rewrite all of your risk assessments using our risk matrix instead of your risk matrix, so that we
Yeah.
understand the
Uh,
levels of risk, right? So you're not only duplicating activity, you're making people use a system that they don't know and understand.
Yeah.
to
It's
dumb it down
it's
and
crazy.
make it
It's like
one dimensional and
use
stupid.
our
Yeah.
permit system, not your own. So why would you want someone using a system that they don't understand instead of a system that they do understand, just to make things look good for you as a client, right? That's
Yeah.
Well, and that
that's
and that
wild.
not only is dangerous in the sense, adding extra work and all that stuff, it's also back to your point about innovation and learning from these contractors. You miss the opportunity to ask questions. Okay, teach me about your
Yeah.
system. Maybe there's
Yeah,
something really interesting and cool about your system that we should be looking at. But you don't do that because it's too difficult for you. So you make them do all the hard work.
yeah,
Well, and that
It's just
that again comes back to, where an audit in its best possible form, that you know, a shitty audit is that sort of forcing dumb ideas so we can multiply the dumbness.
Yeah.
And maybe audit is the wrong word, right? Maybe evaluation sounds better. I don't know. But it's asking somebody, well, tell me how you know, like what does safety performance look like for you? On a really good day, how the hell do you know you're safe? What does that mean? And that kind of question, can be a question we ask of all contractors. That can be standardized within our set of sort of starter questions. But we're not pushing some agenda on people that says, do dumb shit. We love this horrible matrix that does nothing for us. You should love it too. I, I mean, to Dave's point, how fucking stupid.
I love how much you're doubling down on audits in this episode, Ben.
Well, here's the reason that I'm doubling down, but you're gonna give me shit, is because so many fucking people, they don't listen to this podcast, but look, there's a lot of people out there who are obligated to do the thing that their company does, right?
Yep.
You're not going to go to work and just say, I don't do audits anymore, boss, fuck off, right? Like someone is
Well,
going
you
to
could.
require that.
I,
You could, it's a career limiting move. You'll be promoted to customer,
It's
as they say.
challenging at a
But
minimum.
for a lot of folks, right, you have to live with it. And I think it comes back to like when we were at Seahole and we're talking about these things that are kind of limiting to safety. But if you have to deal with it, what can you do that makes it less bad? And there are so many people that deal with, in this country, a great example is a DoD audit, Department of Defense audit, which is this massive, massive process that contributes nothing to the relationship. It Someone from the Department of Defense is going to find me now, but
what's the audit?
it,
Is the
it,
audit just to make sure that that the average person has enough guns?
it's a jobs program, I think. I'm
Okay,
not sure.
got it.
It's to make sure somebody has something to do. But they're massive, ridiculous audits, but you don't have a choice to make it go away. It will be there. So if we have to do it to ensure a contracting relationship, I I think what I'm trying to double down on is how do you make it suck less?
Yeah,
Because
and
no one hears that word and says, "Yeah, this is amazing," and then they still have to do 9 of them a year because people tell them to.
yeah, and I think you're exactly right. So, mate, in the safety clutter work, it kind of said it's not as easy as just going, "This is clutter, stop doing it. This is good, do it." It's like,
Yeah.
a lot of it is about understanding the intent and then redesigning the
Yeah,
process
there you
around
go.
what that intent is. And if the intent of an audit is to understand ways that we can make work better, and then we can reorientate that process to actually deliver on that intent. It may actually look very different, but you're right. We might just go, oh, we're going to call them
But you could
assessments.
name it. You
We're
could
going to call
name it
them,
audit.
you can just call it, we're going to
Yeah,
do safety assessments instead of safety
yeah,
audits. And
perfect.
the assessment, here's the process, and here's some standard questions, and here's the open questions we're going to use, and
Yep.
here's the criteria for an improvement. And the only improvements we're going to do are systemic ones that are measurable and or observable for Ron's work. And like you could yeah, in 5 minutes you could redesign
Yeah.
your process to be be effective. So I'm just giving
And
you
here's
I'm
how
just
we
giving you
know it
shit, dude.
works, which is
I
another good. No,
it's
I
just
know. Look,
it's
I've earned
it's
it.
a
It's
sport.
fine.
It's a sport. I don't know. I'm at a
Well,
loss now because as we have one person say on LinkedIn, like this whole podcast revolves around giving Ron shit about his PhD, right? And so
yeah,
we
it's got
we
to be something else.
we need some new material, right? So
It's me. It's me stealing clients,
we might have to. Well,
which has not happened, but could
we've still got
presumably.
that.
Now, bitch.
We've still got the BBS episode in the queue. So
Oh fuck.
Um,
Yeah.
but like, so I guess one of the things I just want to, as I know we're, I don't know how long we've been talking, but like, something you said earlier, Ben, about this being very directive. In some sense, it's always going to be directive. And like Dave, you mentioned about power, there's always going to be power relationships. Like this is something I really grappled with in thinking about what the implications of my research were. And there's some things where I think we have clear leverage points. We've hit on a few of them, but the other one is like there's always going to be some kind of power dynamic here, and that's I think just structurally built into the system where there's a customer and there's going to be a contractor, and there's always I don't know how to eliminate that completely. Um, and so one of the things that I think we have to recognize is it's always going to be way easier for the customers to help this situation than it is the contractors. And I know that some people are listening, like the one or two people who are contractors, and you're going to be like, well, what the fuck do I do about it? There's still going to be leverage points, but I would start often with, okay, contractors often also have contractors. Like an easy example is like in my work, I have a customer that I work with, and I also have contractors I work with. When I'm thinking about how I'm going to apply this to my own work, it's way easier for me to start with the contractors. I can try to build that. And so when I get directive back to like exercising my power, I'm focusing my power on how can I build a system that supports coordination.
Hmm.
Like, so if I have to do audits, for example, one of the things I would like to do, and I'm trying to do, it takes time and like coaching and like convincing them that I'm really actually serious in what I'm asking for. But like I would like to bring the contractor into those audits, like co-audit with me. Let's do it
Yeah.
together. Let's look at the entire system. It's not me auditing you, it's us looking at our process
Yeah.
together.
And I think
It's the assessment, I guess.
the extension of that, Ron, if we are talking about sort of like safety issues in these relationships, like something I have seen success with, and I'm also surprised that it's not a widespread practice, is the health and safety teams from the client side and the health and safety team from the contractor side just spending time to get on the same page. So, organizations, I can think of one that I know that, they when they kick off any project or any contract, they do significant workshopping between the client health and safety teams and the contractor. Like, how are we going to mutually support each other? What do you need from us as a contractor health and safety to help you as the client health and safety to manage the things that you need to manage in your organization? And then what do we need you to do, run defense on or support to give us, the space and support to do things we need to. And I still think a lot of that cross-boundary joint activity around health and safety can actually be managed by two health and safety teams working closely together, assuming that they both have influence within their respective organizations, right? Which is,
Yeah.
and we still
But
often
very, very rare.
it's
And
very rare.
and
Often the client health and safety person doesn't even know any of the health and safety people inside the client until there's an
or they're
incident,
not
right?
there.
You know,
Or they're not there, right? At a
so
contractor who is sort of resource constrained or smaller organization, they don't have that person in a dedicated role,
Yeah.
and then it just gets
yeah,
confusing.
so that's tough.
And now
Yeah,
the client has this sense that they have to sort of mother this contractor because, oh, well, they don't have somebody in that role, and I have to make sure that they're safe despite themselves. And I think that's a part of that thing too. But in those meetings, I think, look, it's questions again, like what do you need to have confidence as a client? What do you need to have confidence in from me that I can help you answer?
yeah,
And here's some ways that we answer those things. And they might look a little different than what yours look like. Is that cool? Right? Does this give you confidence or not? And although some of that I think comes down to managing anxiety, as Drew's talked about lately, anxiety is real. And some of it, I think some of that contracting relationship is truly about or has to acknowledge that anxiety management,
yeah.
I agree with that.
And there's ways
not
of
just the
working.
actual science of or
Yeah,
whatever safety is.
yeah,
Well, and to that end, like something that you mentioned earlier, Dave, about like how these things come down often from leadership. Sometimes we enforce things on our contractors that are simply designed to make our leaders feel better about how the work's
Yeah.
happening. And that is, as much as we can blunt that or stop it, like that's going to make your contractor's lives a lot easier because I guarantee they fucking hate it. Uh, it's
I
so,
think everyone hates it,
yeah.
right? There's a shared hatred within the client too of
Don't,
just
as much as
doing
you can
things
not use your contractor to solve internal communication problems in your organization.
off. But
That's
that's what it exacerbates, right? And that's sort of that amplification of issues. If you have communication issues internally and you have a contractor relationship, that's going to get amplified.
yeah. So
Yeah.
for
So what do we do?
the one person who's still listening now needs to get on with their life. So how are we gonna wrap this thing up?
I don't fucking know. No, I mean, I think
Ron hasn't solved it yet. I
I
mean,
don't think
there's
you've
still
got,
revisions to the
and I don't
PH
even
to
think you've
the
got yourself
dissertation.
fired, Ron. So I don't know what you were so anxious about.
Well, I mean, you have to time it. If we did this podcast at certain times, I've told you the times too. If we did at those times, I guarantee I will get fired. Um,
So if you're listening
yeah,
and you need
I
a guy wearing Mickey ears in a
um,
sweater
oh my God.
fighting off,
Dr. Gant's your guy.
he's the
I think
guy.
I think number one, like, this has to be an intentional thing. Back to what you said earlier, Ben, about like this can't be a passive process. You can't just assume it's going to happen. Like there are real world challenges that people are actively managing in this relationship that are fundamentally different than just working with an employee. Um, like the coordination, the effort, and just trying to learn your processes very quickly, but not spending too much time because I don't need to know the ins and outs because I'm going to be gone in a few months. Um, that's
Oh,
difficult.
wait a minute.
Wait a minute. A few weeks.
That's foreshadowing.
Yeah. But like, you know what I mean? Like I think we have to orient ourselves to manage that because often a lot of contractor management's about like, how do I help them know the hazards, and which is great. And there's some value there, but like that's insufficient. It
And I
doesn't
think
the breadth of the problem that we're trying to solve for.
And I think I like your point about investment. Just this has to be an active process, not a passive process. And when we think about these boundaries, we've got to understand. I think it's important that we understand in social systems that this is a very social process. Yes, we're going to have a formal contract which details kind of like who does what and when, but this is a very social process. It's about power and it's about human emotion and fear and anxiety and so we need to actively sort of manage this as a social process, not as a set of terms and conditions.
Well, to that end, just to piggyback off of that, one of the strongest findings in my research was that like one of the ways
Oh,
that people mitigate this problem, because this is not a problem that just is standing there unsolved. Humans are actively adapting to the problem. One of the strongest ways they do that is by building relationships across the boundary with others in order to smooth out some of these challenges on their own. And so that's happening. So one of the other things you can do is start to be aware of where it's happening, how it's happening. Don't thwart that. Maybe find ways to support it. How can we help people build these kinds of relationships, the social connections that enable this work to happen?
Yeah.
So I think that's one other area.
cool.
And then Ben's audit thing, I think is really smart too.
Yeah, lots. I think more different audits
Daily audits will solve this
daily.
problem.
Lots of checklists.
Look, if I'm going to add anything, it's not audits, but I think there's a lot of focus here. It, as people are going through these relationships, there's a lot of focus on big picture, on project kickoffs, on Ron Gantt charts, on
Ew.
all these meetings that come up here and there. Um,
Uncle gets
and the
nickel.
reality is that the people that are that are neck deep in the work are thinking one or two steps ahead, right? A lot of days. And so I think it's those really frequent check-ins of just saying, look, dude, what's your top three today? What's your top five today? What's the one thing today that I can kick out of the way for you? And to just keep doing that over and over and asking those questions. Uh, I think it's a frequency thing at small scale too.
And so I think that question, which could be the title of the podcast, is how can I improve the experience for the person on the other side of the glory hole?
That's, that's a
That's my
long
dissertation
podcast
title.
title,
That we
but
found it. That's the dissertation title.
we'll workshop it a little bit.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll shorten that.
That is, but that's episode 10. I mean, we've done it.
Nailed it.
Nailed it.
Holy smokes. I don't know about nailed it, but we've
Got
made
it.
some
Got
we've
it.
made some progress and we've said glory hole 4 times at least, which is a win.
5 now.
I would say. Yeah,
You're welcome. That's it.
Hey,
Go check out the merch that we lose money religiously on. Uh,
we're
but
good at
look, it's
it.
our contribution to world
The
peace.
fucking
And
jacket.
and there's all
God,
this
that
new.
jacket.
There's our new safety jerks line
Yes.
whole line in there, which is
A whole line of
cool.
safety jerks. And it's just getting better. every day. Gets worse before it gets better,
Yeah.
but we're
It's
getting there
the whole thing is a merch store with a little podcast side
with
hustle
a side project of a
podcast.
podcast.
Yeah.
Thanks for look. If you've listened to all 10,
Yeah.
there's, I mean, there's not a prize,
Well, I think you deserve to
but
be a
thank you.
guest. If you listen to all 10, you deserve to be a guest on the podcast.
We should. Oh man,
We need another guest.
maybe just a podcast with all the tenors in there, and we'll open it up to anybody. You know,
Oh,
it's like 15 people on here.
Oh,
It's a
that's a
great
bit.
idea.
There's not 15 people who've listened to all 10.
Yeah.
No, that's true. Well, you know, they might have by then.
We count the other Ben that does the editing.
If they count the three of us, yeah.
Even the Ben
All
who
right.
edits this, he doesn't listen to the whole thing.
No, other Ben is just looking for a start and a stop.
Yeah.
All
All right. Done.
Okay.
Here's your stop,
Is
Ben.
that it?